Hello, this is the Critical Advocate, and today we will review a Pakistani film called Joyland. Joyland is written and directed by Saim Sadiq. This is his debut feature-length theatrical release. The film was so well received at the 75th Cannes Film Festival that it even received a standing ovation. I have not seen any of his previous work, but from what I gathered online, he has made a couple of short films by the name of Nice Talking to You and Darling. The latter received an award at the Venice International Film Festival. Joyland struggled to get a release in theatres all over Pakistan. It was not until some parts of the film were blurred or cut out by the censor board that it eventually got a release date. And as of today, it is screened in limited cinemas across Pakistan. Alright, blurring out the quote-unquote objectionable material is one thing, but overall the media buzz it gathered was due to the inclusion in the film of a love story involving a trans character. Does that make the film controversial though? Not for me, at least, because I watch and consume all kinds of films from different countries in different languages. Believe me when I say that, I consume a lot of films and all sorts of genres. My most favorite is the horror genre, within which there are some deeply disturbing horror movies out there. I'm not in support of censorship. If films I am referring to, if they were to be censored, I'd at least understand why. However, Joyland does not compare to some of those films in terms of controversy and the so-called questionable material. If you consume a lot of films, then this film will not bother you. But I do understand why the film seems controversial. Perhaps not by the Western standards, but rather by the Pakistani standards. That just comes with the territory. If you want to make money on your films in Pakistan, it's best to avoid the controversial topics. Look, I'm not here to debate which standards are better, because I think to each their own. But I will acknowledge the fact that it is not a film that people in Pakistan are accustomed to watch, because it is unlike anything in the market, and so may not be for everyone, because in the end, there are different views on the subject matter. Let's take a detour and talk about me for a second, which is my favorite topic. Films for me, although fiction, are perspectives. It is like looking through the outside through the window of your room and watching a story play out on a street. You overhear conversation and sometimes you connect the dots and make your own logical conclusions. Don't want to partake? Then just shut the window close and you will be left alone in silence without the noise of the outside world and in the comforts of the four walls in your room. But it's almost unavoidable that films are all around us and all the time. Joyland for me is one of those instances. It is a snapshot where you observe a group of people living through their struggles. Their struggles might be relatable or completely outlandish, but they do occur regardless, even in Pakistan. The difference is, this one is just encapsulated in a fictitious story, somewhat inspired and borrowed from real life, and is played for you as a motion picture. I don't like censorships, because personally, the more perspectives I observe, the more room it creates for me to grow, whether emotionally or intellectually, and as a consequence, I become more equipped with understanding the inexhaustive variety of life. To deny or close my eyes on fresh perspectives is to deny myself the opportunity to form an opinion, and I believe opinions make us who we are. Many opinions together create a consensus in the society. Therefore, if I disagree with a film after I watch it, more emphasis, by the way, is on the after I watch it part, I can voice my disagreement in an informed and rational way. Whereas collective disagreement is another word for what we call the public court of opinion, and it is a self-cleansing mechanism which filters things out on its own. So why is it that we choose to close our eyes on things before we even see them? I think from a logical perspective, that's not a healthy way to go about things. One way to solve a quote-unquote problem is to understand it first. So why deny that opportunity to yourself? Remember, explaining is not condoning. So why deny yourself from being able to explain something? I mean, you may explain a situation, but that does not mean you agree with it. My job on this show as the critical advocate is to call it the way it is by taking the story as it plays out, whilst also assessing it in terms of cinematography, music, acting, and so on. Anyways, that was a bit exhausting, I bet, so let's just get back to the review. Joyland covers the story of a family consisting of an elderly father and his two married sons. The family seems to be a relatable Pakistani middle-class family. The youngest son of the family, who has been unemployed till this point, finally finds a job, but it is not your average job. He is hired as a backup dancer by Biba, a trans woman who performs at this erotic dance theatre show. As they both spend time together, a love story starts to develop between the two. Let's talk about the actors first. I do want to say that the whole cast is top notch. Everyone does a great job. If we even look at the wheelchair bound father, we don't know whether he is disabled or old or both, played excellently by Salman Pirzada. He is the patriarch of the family. His wife passed away and he has two sons for whom he cares about quite a bit, while the son's two wives, not so much. He is practically a traditional Pakistani dad slash father-in-law. The oldest son, Salim, played by Suhail Samir, he is one of the two people in the house that has a job. He has delegated the household chores completely to his wife Nuchi, played by Sarwat Gilani. She is a housewife who takes care of the house, cooks for everyone, cleans for everyone, and tenders to their young daughters. Salim was alright, maybe because there was lack of dialogue or screen time for him, but I think he was utilized well enough for you to not like his character. Basically, I didn't like him. I heard people say that he is the typical archetype of Mardangi or manhood in Urdu, but my take is that him being a man didn't really have anything to do with him just being an unlikable douchebag. He's one of those people that you think don't exist, but the problem is I've met such people in my life, so it's not so far-fetched. His wife, Nuchi, was awesome. She brings a lot of traditional stability to this family. She's able to keep her patriarchs, the elderly father, and her husband happy, but she was also cool enough to chill with the youngest brother's wife, and in her own rebellious way, even smoked a cigarette or two. Sarwat Gilani did a great job in this role. She was able to navigate being manipulative and loyal to her husband to a fault, but not in a manner where you start disliking her. She is stuck somewhere between the traditional ways of the family and more progressive thought, but she tries her best to maintain a sense of balance. The main protagonist is the youngest son of the family, Haider, played by Ali Junejo. He is unemployed and instead spends his time taking care of the house and helping out his sister-in-law Nuchi. He has never had a job in his life, and he is a fragile-looking fella, a bit sensitive and emotionally intelligent, unlike his father or older brother. I'll come to him in a second. His wife, Mumtaz, played excellently by Rasti Farooq, works at a parlor or a makeup salon. She has no problems being the breadwinner of the marriage. She is strong-willed, self-aware, energetic, quite animated with her faces, and is a good actress overall. The story of Joyland is essentially a love story between the youngest son and the transgender starlet he meets after he gets employed by her as her backup dancer in an erotic dance theatre. The trans woman by the name Biba, played by also a trans woman in real life, Alina Khan, is a very no-shits-given, confident, assertive dancer who dreams to be celebrated and accepted by the male audiences, almost sometimes resorting to being an opening act for the main star Shabo in order to get any time in the limelight. But she gets discouraged each time she sets foot on stage, as the audience is put off, and they walk off or boo her for being who she is. Haider ends up being the only person that is there to pick her up when she's down. He almost follows her like a pup, and that is where we see them getting close. Both Ali Junejo and Alina Khan play their roles really well. The love story and how it develops, although initially seems a bit forced and out of the blue, but eventually does work for the most part because it made more sense to me in hindsight after watching the film. I am addressing the odd fact that Haider is supposedly a heterosexual male already married to Mumtaz, who is a woman. So how is it that he falls in love with Biba? That is a bit outlandish, isn't it? Well, there are some scenes which were either cut out or blurred, where there is more context, but even in the censored version, the subtle dialogue reveals something unusual about Haider. Let's talk more about this in spoilers, for which I'll leave a timestamp below. Controversy made it seem like the film is promoting a certain political agenda, and this might be potentially true, partially though, because I understand the criticism and where it's coming from, but I do think that stuff like this does happen in Pakistan. To be outraged by what is apparent and exists in real life is a bit absurd to me. The trans community in Pakistan are literal ghosts living amongst us, and just because we choose to close our eyes on them does not mean they don't exist. And it doesn't mean they can't be written with a certain nuance and depth in contrast to be played up as a comic relief in films. I for one found the film to be about themes of sexual liberation and exploration, and that was quite apparent in the film. Throughout our lives, no matter our age or gender, we all experience this, and we are faced with this reality, which is part and parcel with our human bodies. It applies to us all, whether we are born the way we are or socially constructed into who we become. The film also touches upon the patriarchy, which I'd say is quite relevant to Pakistan. Women face all sorts of dangers, whether in public eye on the street or privately in their homes. They are killed or brutalized for behaving out of line. The perpetrators could be complete strangers or their own family members and relatives stemming from the family's own insecurities and pride. I'm not trying to generalize the treatment of women across the board, but we tend to tag along the ways of our forefathers of keeping control on women by dictating whether they can work or not, whether they can go out or not, how they dress and so on. For example, Mumtaz worked at a parlor before Heather gets a job, but it is Mumtaz who is forced to retire only because she is needed at home. And according to Heather's elderly father, a woman is best suited for the household chores. The theme just screams that the father cares more for his sons and not so much for his sons' wives, despite the wives or daughters doing the bulk of the work around the house to maintain the household. The film also wants to say that trans people in Pakistan have depth and complexity of emotions. It is refreshing to see complex trans characters realized on screen. Joyland is a good drama. It really absorbed me into its world with its believable characters. I have not seen anything like this in Pakistani cinema, so it instantly takes the originality points from me. Plus, it is acted excellently. The actors, almost all of them, do a great job. The soundtrack was okay, but I didn't expect any big songs as this was a different kind of movie. There was one song in which Biba and Heather are performing to this English song, which is quite catchy. The cinematography was great. The color palette of the film felt surreal, as if the wheel of the world has been stripped down to reveal the imperfect interior, and the camera angles were nicely done. Although due to the lack of choice, I watched the film in Centaurus Cinema in Islamabad, and it was one of the worst decisions, but there was no other choice. The proportions of the film did not fit the aspect ratio of the screen in Centaurus, and it looked cropped down in the middle, which looked weird almost. Plus, there was a nice lady that kept kicking me my seat from the back. Please, when you go to the cinema, don't kick people's seats. Where are your manners? That annoyed me. I literally wanted to just stand up and yell at her, "What's your problem?" Well, the film seems to be hitting that 10 out of 10 rating, don't you think? Well, no. It's guilty, damn it. Let's bring out the guilt counter. At number 1, we have the film will turn you instantly trans. Literally, after me and my family watched Joyland in cinema, everyone in the theater unanimously just stood up, nodded at each other, and then we proceeded to take our phone and book our sex change operation. The queues are long, you won't believe it, but I think we're on the right track. Just kidding. Let's bring out the real guilt counter. At number 1, we have unresolved plotline. I understand that the film did an admirable job with how they executed the story. However, the plot with the love story does not lead to a convenient end. It almost makes it seem that the rest of the story was worked around the initial plot. Hey, let's make a film that will show the trans person fall in love with a supposed straight man. I wish there was more concrete resolution to the story, especially when it consumed the screen time of the film for such a long time. In the end, it just amounted to nothing and ended up causing more damage than necessary. At number 2, we have the third act. For me, the third act kind of lost its momentum, and there is a sad twist that comes in a very unexpected way. I mean, unexpected twists are great, right? Well, they are not when a character is built up to be extremely intelligent and self-aware, but ends up doing something which does not convince me, for example, of their ability to do that. There was not enough setup for it. There was something off in that regard for me. We can talk about this more in the spoiler section. At number 3, we have a morbid, abrupt ending. This one kind of blends in with the previous guilt counter. For a film that is called Joyland, it was anything but joyful. It was sad and depressing as the credits started rolling. There's not much to be left with either. The film just ends just because. Look, there are plenty of examples of films that have a story arc and it resolves in the end, and yet it leaves an abrupt ending in a way which makes you think. Inception is an example, but you're not cheated out of the whole story arc here. It seems like all the right conflict was set up, there was no way to resolve it, So the writers just chickened out and just ended the film. Okay, so with that said, I will give Joyland a not guilty with a score of 7 out of 10. The movie is original. It is something we have never seen before. It has top-notch Oscar-worthy acting and performances and has great atmosphere. The story kind of dwindles by the end, and the abrupt ending kind of ruins it. Some will say it is an experience, but I feel there should have been a bit more and a bit more of a satisfying ending. Anyways, this wraps up our case. Stick around for the spoiler section. Do like, share and subscribe to the channel and let me know what you thought of the film in the comments below. This was The Critical Advocate, an advocate by day and a critic by night. Till next time, Tasvidania, Khudafiz and bye bye. So let's talk about some of the parts of the film. When it comes to the love story involving Heather and Biba, some people were like, oh, this film promotes cheating and Heather is a straight man and a married man, and yet the movie purports that trans women could be good looking enough for a straight man to just fall astray, fall off the path and pursue them instead. As if trans women will turn straight men gay. Well, if I didn't read up what happened in the blurred out and cut out scenes in the film, I would be the first one to call out this bullshit. But what I essentially read was that Heather was not a straight man after all. This is even confirmed with this uncensored scene where Biba expresses her intention to undergo a sex change operation. And he's like, no, don't do that. I think you are better the way you are. And although it is unclear, this is the conflict between the two which drives them apart. She wants to transition to be a woman, yet he wants her to remain with all her male appendages, which makes it seem like Heather was either gay or bisexual. That made sense. This also leaves us to speculate that Heather was always like that before he married Mumtaz, and there was nothing wrong with Mumtaz per se as a wife. It was Heather who was the problem. There was no resolution to Biba and Heather's story. It just ends abruptly, and it is very disappointing, to be honest. Like, I was left with wanting a little more. I mean, at least a scene involving them having that one last hurrah, or I don't know, having that one last conversation. There was no resolution, and Biba and Heather's love story, it just ends, which is disappointing. Another issue I had was with the circumstances surrounding Mumtaz's suicide. Yes, Mumtaz suicides eventually after supposedly finding out that she can't work. It is revealed in a flashback after her death that before her marriage to Heather, this was the biggest thing that they negotiated amongst each other before they said yes to their parents about marrying one another. Another reason why she came to this point where she suicided, according to many people, is that she didn't intend to get pregnant. She was devastated by the news and literally wanted to run away because she realized now she will always be bound to the house and will never work again. She will spend her life catering to the child. Another reason could be that she found out that her husband is not interested in her, and I think the scene that made her snap was the scene in which the family is celebrating the father's birthday, and he only says he's happy because he has his sons. No appreciation speech for the daughter-in-laws who work tirelessly around the house. Look, I get it, but they also showed throughout the whole movie that Mumtaz was a very strong-willed and self-aware individual. She was not the type that would just do what she did. Why did she not just run away if things got toxic? Why did she just choose to come back? You're telling me that she couldn't divorce him? Plus, although I disagree with how Heather's older brother said a few things, which was really disgusting, when he was expressing more grief towards the death of the unborn child, more in comparison to Mumtaz's death, and then Heather and his brother, they start fighting, and then Nucci is the one that gives a very outstanding performance of interrupting and shutting both of these guys down, telling them that she's dead, let her go, let it be, why bother arguing about it now? This was a very good scene. Everyone's acting was top notch. Big thumbs up to all of these guys. However, again, let's get back to Mumtaz's death. It does not make me want to believe, even for a second, that Mumtaz was such a selfish person to not only take her life, but a child who was innocent in the matter. I think it would have made her an even stronger character if she lived through all of this bullshit, but yet she preserved the life of the innocent child. I don't know, that is my thoughts on this, but plus, I also don't know how I should feel about Heather. He comes inside the bathroom, watching her holding the bottle with poison, and ignores her to go to sleep. Like, What the hell was he that aloof? What makes him a considerate person or an empathetic main protagonist? I don't know. I can't really back up people who are so like in the zone in their own brain that they don't see people sitting on a commode like this with the poison in hand, and he doesn't even ask her. He just kisses her like a puppy on the head and just leaves. I'm like, you idiot. Go back, ask her what's up. Like, I mean, don't you think she was acting a bit crazy when she was like acting up and playing with the kids, and I don't know, in hopes of maybe falling and tripping and killing the child in the process or something like that? I mean, it just was a bit off, and Heather did not look really good after that scene to me personally. I mean, there are issues with the film, but it was something different than what the Pakistani cinema turns out, more or less copying Bollywood films. Anyways, this is the end of the spoiler section. Please do like, share and subscribe. Leave a comment and tell me what you thought about the film. This was The Critical Advocate, an advocate by day and a critic by night. Till next time, it's Vidanya Khudafiz and bye bye.